Welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word, a daily devotional in the Word of God.
So, Derek, it's anytime we come approaching an election, and we have them all the time, sometimes we even have special elections. People want to know, where do you stand, where do you stand, where do you stand? And I'm reminded of the fella who, when somebody asked him what he believed, he said, well, some of my friends believe this, and some of my friends believe that. And he said, I stand with my friends. So, how should we think about the government?
Well, that's a really good question because it's something that impacts us no matter what country we live in or where we are in the world. We have a response to government, and some people, like you said, they're confused. They're trying to figure out, okay, what should my response be? Well, Jesus speaks to this in some regard here in the book of Matthew in chapter 22. He talks about at least one response to government that we should abide by, that we should follow. And in Matthew chapter 22, starting in verse 15, and the Pharisees were always trying to trip him up. They're always trying to get after him. And it says, and the Pharisees went and plotted and that how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth, nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? So they're asking a question about taxes, and I know a lot of people would love us to say, no, you don't have to pay taxes. But that is not the response that Jesus gives in regard to our response to government. It says, but Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the tax money. So they brought him a denarius, and he said to them, whose image and inscription is this? They said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard these words, they marveled and left him, and they went their way. Now, that's really, there's so many things you could pull out of that, because he rendered to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and God the things that are God's. Well, everything belongs to God. Okay. And so when you think about it, everything does belong to him. But he's giving us an answer that our response to government should be appropriate to, what is being done. If there's taxes to be paid, we pay our taxes. If there's laws to be followed, we follow the laws. Now, we do not step out of the line of what our service is to God. But the laws that we can follow that are in accordance to the will of God or do not contradict the will of God, we follow them. We pay our taxes. We follow the laws. Those are just some things we do in response to government. Mr. Gary, what do you think?
Well, Paul elaborates on what you just said in Romans chapter 13. It really goes right along with it.
He does.
He's right in the same range. Beginning verse 1, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Now, in the United States, we might say, well, I'm not so sure about that, but I'm telling you, you start talking about Red China,
right?
Or you talk about Cambodia under Pol Pot and all that, and wow. They get their authority from God, and really, when Paul wrote this, I feel pretty confident Nero is the Caesar,
right.
And he's not exactly the best friend of Christianity.
No, he's not.
And of course, Domitian later be even worse.
Right.
But so the authority comes from God. Now, will they have to answer to him? Well, just read the Minor Prophets.
Right.
They will have to answer to him.
They will.
Because he gave them the authority, and they ought to act like he gave it to them. But we need to submit to the authority, except when they ask us to violate the will of God, which of course Peter and John and the others made that very emphatic. Acts 4 and Acts 5,
right.
Both go that way.
Right.
Well, he goes on, therefore whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise for the same. You said, keep the law.
Right.
Well, that's what he just said.
Right.
You don't have to worry if you keep the law. If everybody else is throwing their brakes on because they were blasting by you on the road, and you're set cruise control on the speed limit, whatever that is, you don't have to put your brakes on.
Right.
You know, but they're worried about that policeman that's up ahead, you know. All right. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. And then he goes on and says, pay taxes, which the Lord, you know, has already said. You underscored that. So I think the message is, finally, I may not like how any election goes, a particular one, but God gives them the authority. God knows how to use them, and if they use it incorrectly, he knows how to deal with them.
Right.
My attitude ought to be, as long as it doesn't violate the will of God, I'm yielding to authority.
That's right, and it's so important for us to understand that. And as we go into any election, we understand where authority comes from and who we're ultimately submitting to. We're submitting to God, and as we submit to Him, we do obey the laws of the land as long as they don't contradict the laws of God. And we go to God in prayer, and we go to God thinking about our government, our leaders, and thinking about each other, because as we submit to God, as we submit to other authorities in the land, we are honoring Him in doing so.